It was April 23, 2025, at Purgatory Chasm State Reservation in Sutton, Massachusetts, a rugged, scenic place known for its dramatic rock formations and narrow, uneven trails. That afternoon, 49-year-old Carrie Sanger had planned a simple family outing. A devoted mother of 4 from Topsfield, she arrived with 3 of her children and her brother for what was meant to be a joyful hike together in nature. Carrie loved the outdoors and had always embraced wellness in every part of her life. After years of working as an oncology nurse, she had recently transitioned into a new chapter, opening her own wellness studio, Balanced Body, in Topsfield, where she practiced massage therapy and Reiki healing. This hike was supposed to be a break, a peaceful few hours with the people she loved most. But at 1:45 p.m., everything changed. A 911 call was placed to Sutton Police. A woman had fallen between 50 and 75 feet into the chasm. That woman was Carrie. Rescue crews responded quickly. The chasm, carved deep into solid rock, is a quarter-mile long and surrounded by sheer cliffs and narrow ledges. By the time emergency responders reached her, several nearby hikers, some with medical training, were already attempting to save her. They had witnessed the fall and rushed to help, but her injuries were catastrophic. Carrie was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities confirmed that the fall occurred in full view of her 3 children. In the chaos that followed, they ran to find park rangers who called in state police and rescue teams. Her husband, Michael Sanger, was notified soon after. Investigators determined the fall to be accidental. A family friend, Tim Powley, later said, "It was just a trip, a loss of footing. That part of the trail is especially difficult. Purgatory Chasm, with its sharp drops and exposed rock ledges, has long drawn adventurous hikers." One visitor, Andy Spears, noted, "There are trails above the chasm with dangerous overhangs. If you go too close to the edge to look down, it's risky. It's so sad something like this happened here." Carrie had no known health issues. Officials believe a simple misstep on treacherous ground was enough to cause the fatal fall. Even with the fast response, nothing more could be done. News of her passing spread quickly across the Topsfield community. Friends and loved ones described Carrie as kind, selfless, and full of light. A GoFundMe campaign organized by family friend Brooke Powley raised over $100,000 in just days. "She was a bright light," Brooke wrote, "a wonderful, selfless mother who raised 4 incredible, respectful, responsible kids." Her husband, Michael, later spoke to the press, wearing one of Carrie's shirts. "She was amazing," he said, "the brightness and light on a dark day for a lot of people." The two had met in college and were preparing to celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary. Carrie's impact stretched far beyond her family. As a nurse, therapist, and healer, she was someone people trusted in their most vulnerable moments. Friend and colleague Molly Schur remembered her as someone who could light up a room and make you feel safe. She had recently stepped away from nursing to focus fully on her wellness practice, renovating her studio by hand, proud of what she had created. In 2016, Carrie and Michael were featured in a local news segment about veterans. Michael, an Iraq War veteran, credited Carrie with helping him through his darkest times. Another friend, Catherine Schonfarber, wrote, "Carrie was a radiant presence, a healer, a teacher, a friend whose kindness touched countless lives. For the Sanger family and for everyone who knew her, the loss is overwhelming. A place known for its wild beauty became the setting of an unimaginable tragedy." Carrie spent her final moments surrounded by nature and the people she loved, and in the days that followed, her family held tightly to memories, to photos, and to the warmth she left behind. It was a clear July morning in 1920 when Charles Stevens, a 58-year-old barber from Bristol, England, stood at the edge of the Niagara River, staring down one of nature's most powerful wonders. Behind him, the crowd watched in curious silence. Ahead, the thundering roar of Niagara Falls promised either glory or a grave. Charles wasn't a professional daredevil. He wasn't rich or famous. He was a father of 11, a working man who had grown restless with the ordinary. Inspired by tales of thrill-seekers who had tried, and sometimes survived, the plunge over the falls in barrels, he was drawn across the Atlantic with a singular goal: become the first Englishman to survive Niagara Falls in a barrel, and, hopefully, turn that glory into fortune. The daredevil scene at Niagara was buzzing in those days. A few had made the drop and lived to tell the tale, reaping brief moments of fame. Charles saw it as a ticket out of obscurity. He believed that with the right design and enough courage, he could beat the falls and cash in on the spotlight that followed. His barrel was built to be tough, crafted from stout oak, bound with metal hoops, and reinforced to take the crushing blow of the 167-foot plunge. At its base sat a 100-pound anvil, meant to act as ballast, to keep the barrel upright during the fall. It made sense in theory. The heavier the bottom, the more stable the fall. But nature rarely plays along with theories. Charles, calm and determined, climbed into his wooden capsule, shut in by the sound of the water crashing around him. His assistants gave the barrel a final push into the current, and just like that, he was off. The river seized the barrel instantly, tossing it like a toy in a bathtub. It spun, rocked, and slammed against waves as it raced toward the precipice. The crowd, now breathless, watched as the barrel edged closer to the drop. It teetered for a split second, then plunged into the mist with a thunderous crash, swallowed by the raw force of the falls. Then came silence. For a few agonizing minutes, the crowd waited, eyes scanning the frothing water below, hoping for a sign, anything. Then debris began to surface. Pieces of shattered wood drifted downriver. And then, among the wreckage, something more horrifying. A human arm, still strapped inside a section of the barrel. Charles Stevens had not survived. The very anvil meant to keep him stable had become the cause of his death. The weight had dragged the barrel with such force that when it slammed into the rocks below, it exploded on impact. The structure had offered no protection. There was no second chance, no miracle survival, only tragedy. Charles Stevens' fatal attempt was a sobering moment for Niagara Falls and for the daredevil culture that had flourished around it. His story didn't end in glory or riches, but in wreckage and mourning. Authorities later used his death as a cautionary tale, discouraging future stunts and warning others that the falls, no matter how inviting the fame, were no place for amateurs or illusions of control. He was a man chasing a dream, hoping for immortality. Instead, he became a warning, a footnote in the long history of those who underestimated nature's fury. Charles Stevens' story remains not one of success, but of stark reality. The falls don't negotiate, and even the best-laid plans can be torn apart in seconds by a force that doesn't care who you are. On a summer Sunday in Yellowstone National Park, the tranquility of the wild was suddenly disrupted by a clash between man and beast. A 47-year-old visitor from Cape Coral, Florida, approached a bison, an act that, though common among curious tourists, often comes with serious consequences. The massive animal, feeling threatened, responded swiftly and powerfully, goring the man. He was left with minor injuries and quickly treated by emergency medical personnel. While he survived the incident, it marked yet another reminder of the dangers that lurk behind Yellowstone's breathtaking beauty. This was the first bison-related injury of the year, but the fourth since 2023. The pattern is as troubling as it is predictable. In a place where nature reigns supreme, the rules are simple. Keep your distance, respect the wildlife, and never assume safety in close proximity to animals that, despite their seemingly slow pace and docile appearances, are still wild at heart. The recent incident adds to a growing list of unfortunate encounters. Just last year, an 83-year-old woman from South Carolina found herself on the wrong end of a bison's horns after getting too close. The force of the animal lifted her nearly a foot off the ground, leaving her with serious injuries. A few months earlier, a man under the influence of alcohol had harassed a herd and even kicked one of the bison, a reckless act that ended, unsurprisingly, in him being injured. There was also the tragic case of a newborn bison calf that paid the price for human interference. A man, perhaps believing he was helping, touched and disturbed the calf. As a result, the young animal was rejected by its herd. Park officials, unable to reintroduce it safely, had no choice but to euthanize it. The man was later convicted of disturbing wildlife, a charge that speaks volumes about the importance of boundaries in the park. Yellowstone is not just another national park, it's a living museum of American wildlife, home to the largest population of bison on public land in the country. These animals are survivors, symbols of a species that once teetered on the brink of extinction. In the late 1800s, bison were hunted so aggressively that their numbers plummeted from an estimated 30 million to fewer than 1,000. The devastation was not accidental. Historians and researchers agree that U.S. government policies encouraged the slaughter, in part to disrupt the lives of Native American tribes that depended on the bison for sustenance, clothing, tools, and shelter. By 1902, only about 24 bison remained in Yellowstone. What followed was a century-long conservation effort that stands today as one of the most celebrated triumphs in American environmental history. Thanks to careful management and strict protections, Yellowstone's bison population has rebounded dramatically. Today, over 5,000 of these majestic animals roam the park's valleys and grasslands, often crossing into neighboring parts of Montana. Despite this success, the bison's resilience comes with a cautionary tale. They are not zoo exhibits, nor are they gentle giants. Bison can weigh up to 2,000 pounds and run at speeds of up to 35 miles per hour, 3 times faster than the average human. They are protective of their space, unpredictable, and highly responsive to perceived threats. Most injuries happen because visitors ignore warning signs, both literal and metaphorical, lured by the false belief that proximity equals safety. The National Park Service repeatedly urges visitors to keep at least 25 yards away from bison at all times. Still, each year brings new stories of people who cross the invisible line, sometimes for a photo, sometimes out of ignorance, and sometimes simply because they forget that Yellowstone isn't a petting zoo. It's a slice of the wild, preserved in all its raw, untamed glory. The man injured this year may have walked away with only minor wounds, but others haven't been so lucky. It was October 19, 1968, when a peaceful day in Yosemite National Park turned grim. A group of hikers stumbled upon a horrifying sight near the base of Nevada Fall. 200 feet downstream from the roaring 594-foot drop lay the lifeless body of 24-year-old Evelyn Consuela Roseman from San Francisco. She had gone hiking alone 3 days earlier and never came back. Evelyn was known to be fiercely independent. She worked as a masseuse in Yosemite during the tourist season and loved exploring nature by herself. That October day had typical conditions, cool weather and low river flow, nothing that would suggest danger. So when she vanished, the theory that she'd been swept away by strong currents didn't make much sense. But the circumstances surrounding Evelyn's death weren't just tragic, they were deeply disturbing. Her corduroy pants were ripped and pulled down to her ankles. Her sweater had been pulled over her head, and another black sweater was found nearby. Oddly, she wasn't wearing any undergarments. Stranger still, her purse, containing all her belongings, was found sitting untouched on a footbridge above the waterfall, far from where her body was found. And her body wasn't where it should have been either. If she had fallen, investigators expected to find her directly below the waterfall. Instead, she was 200 feet downstream. This alone raised red flags. The idea that she jumped or even slipped was ruled out pretty quickly. Even if she had, the impact point just didn't line up. Then came the autopsy, which only deepened the mystery. Evelyn had died from a massive head injury consistent with a fall from a great height. Shockingly, pieces of her brain tissue were found 50 feet away, closer to the waterfall's center. Every single bone in her body was broken, which matched the force of the fall, but oddly, her skin was mostly intact. In falls, this severe torn skin and shredded clothing are common. Not here. Even worse, signs of post-mortem sexual assault were discovered, later confirmed in a case review. At that point, it was clear Evelyn hadn't simply fallen. Someone had caused her death, either by pushing her or by moving her body afterward. Investigators even considered the unsettling idea that someone had somehow launched her. The theory that an animal dragged her didn't hold up. No bite marks, claw injuries, or animal tracks were found. Yet, despite the suspicious evidence, Evelyn's case was handled unusually quietly. Mariposa County officials suggested a coroner's jury might be called, but nothing more was ever said. The FBI got involved, but their files remained sealed. Technically, the case is still open, leaving only scattered media reports and books to piece together the truth. In 2019, during a paranormal conference, one speaker suggested Evelyn's death might have involved a cryptid, but a woman in the audience cut in, pointing to the obvious. There was plenty of evidence of human violence, no monsters required. One book book added more grim details, including that Evelyn had worked as a topless waitress and masseuse, details that, sadly, might have shaped how her case was viewed at the time. In the end, the big questions remain: why move her body? Why risk being seen? And most importantly, who did it? Over 50 years later, Evelyn's death still casts a shadow over Yosemite. Someone caused it, and whoever they were never caught. It was a warm, sunny morning in July 1930 when George Stathakis stood at the edge of history and Niagara Falls. A 46-year-old Greek immigrant living in Buffalo, New York, George wasn't your average dreamer. He believed he had big ideas about life, the afterlife, and our purpose on Earth, and he was determined to share them with the world. But first, he needed the world to notice him. To grab that attention, George planned something truly daring. He would survive a plunge over Niagara Falls in a custom-built barrel. It wasn't just a stunt, it was a bold statement. Months of planning went into the project. George constructed a massive barrel, 10 feet long, 5 feet wide, made of solid oak and reinforced with steel. The whole thing weighed nearly 2,000 pounds. Inside, he packed oxygen tanks, food, and everything he thought he'd need to stay alive during the fall and the wait for rescue. But George wasn't going alone. By his side, or rather, in the barrel with him, was Sonny Boy, his beloved pet turtle, said to be over 150 years old. Bringing Sonny Boy along showed how confident George was in his barrel's design. This wasn't just a stunt to him, it was personal. As the barrel was sealed and rolled into the river, the sound of rushing water grew louder. The current pulled it closer and closer to the edge until, like countless gallons before it, it plunged 167 feet over the mighty Horseshoe Falls. Onlookers held their breath as the barrel disappeared into the mist, swallowed by the thunder and chaos below. To everyone's amazement, the barrel survived the drop. It bobbed up at the base, looking battered but intact. It seemed George had pulled off the impossible. But then, things took a turn. Red Hill Sr., a local Niagara Falls daredevil and rescue expert, had warned George. He said the barrel was too heavy, that its size could cause it to get trapped in the deadly whirlpool currents below the falls. And tragically, that's exactly what happened. The barrel didn't float downstream. It spun violently in the powerful back currents, unreachable by rescuers. Inside, George waited, breathing recycled air in complete darkness, listening to the roar of water around him. His oxygen, meant to last about 8 hours, slowly ran out. Rescuers tried everything, but the churning water made recovery nearly impossible. It took over 22 hours to finally free the barrel. When they opened it, the result was heartbreaking. George had suffocated hours before help arrived. The very barrel he believed would protect him had become his tomb, a symbol of hope and ambition turned into a tragic mistake. But not everything was lost. Sonny Boy, the little turtle, miraculously survived. The creature became a kind of folk hero, appearing in news stories, children's books, and museum exhibits. In a strange way, Sonny Boy carried a piece of George's dream into the world. Today, George's barrel sits on display at Niagara Falls. It's more than a relic. It's a reminder of what can happen when human ambition meets the raw force of nature. A tribute to courage, and a sobering warning about how even the best laid plans can go heartbreakingly wrong. What was meant to be a peaceful safari outing in Zambia turned into a tragic reminder of how unpredictable wildlife encounters can be. Juliana Glay Tourneau, a 64-year-old tourist from New Mexico, was visiting Zambia and took part in a guided safari near the Maramba Cultural Bridge in Livingstone. The group stopped as a herd of elephants crossed the road, a fairly common occurrence in the region and usually a highlight for many visitors. However, what happened next ended in tragedy. According to initial police reports, an elephant approached the vehicle and pulled Juliana out before fatally trampling her. But this version of events was later questioned by the Livingstone Tourism Association. In their statement, they clarified that the tourists had exited the vehicle, something strictly against national park rules. They emphasized that such an attack, where an elephant pulls someone from a vehicle, has never been reported before in Africa or Asia. Regardless of the exact circumstances, the incident has raised concerns and conversations around safari safety and the importance of following guidelines when observing wild animals. This was the second fatal elephant encounter involving a U.S. tourist in Zambia this year. Back in March, 79-year-old Gail Matson from Minnesota lost her life during a game drive in Zambia's Kafue National Park. In that case, a charging elephant flipped over the safari vehicle she was riding in. Gail died in the incident, and 5 others were injured. A video that later surfaced showed the elephant approaching quickly, with someone in the vehicle saying, "It's coming fast," just before the animal made contact. The vehicle tried to stop, but the elephant hooked it with its tusks and rolled it over. Gail's daughter later shared on Facebook that her mother had died in a tragic accident while on her dream adventure. In light of these events, Zambian authorities have reminded tourists and tour operators to exercise extra caution around wildlife. The core message is simple. Wild animals, while incredible to observe, are still wild and unpredictable. Parks across Africa have clear rules to help keep visitors safe, like staying inside safari vehicles at all times and keeping a safe distance from animals. These rules aren't just for show. They're based on years of experience and observation. Zambia, along with neighboring countries like Zimbabwe and Botswana, is also seeing growing elephant populations. With that comes an increased risk of human-wildlife encounters, especially in areas where tourism is on the rise. It's worth noting that safaris are generally very safe when rules are followed and guides are respected. Thousands of people enjoy them every year without incident. However, these recent tragedies are a reminder of why safety protocols matter and why no photo or close-up look is worth risking a life. If you ever find yourself on a safari, remember, the experience is about observing and respecting wildlife in their natural habitat. Staying alert, following your guide's instructions, and keeping your distance are essential steps to ensuring a safe and memorable adventure. This incident, while heartbreaking, can help educate future visitors and reinforce the importance of responsible tourism, something that benefits both humans and the animals we travel so far to see. It was September 1st, 1974, when the Cowan family set off for what was supposed to be a quiet, last-minute camping trip in Oregon's Siskiyou Mountains. Richard Cowan, a 28-year-old logging truck driver, had planned to spend the weekend working on his driveway. But when his truck broke down, he and his wife Belinda, just 22, packed up their 2 kids, 5-year-old David and 5-month-old Melissa, along with their basset hound, Droopy, and headed for the woods instead. The Cowdens were a regular outdoorsy family from White City, Oregon, and their chosen spot, Carberry Creek in the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest, seemed peaceful. That morning, Richard and little David were seen buying milk at a general store in the now-gone town of Copper around 9 a.m. It was the last time anyone would see the family alive. When the Cowdens didn't show up for dinner that night at Belinda's mother's house, she drove to the campsite, and instantly she knew something was wrong. The truck was parked as if nothing was amiss. Keys lay on the picnic table. Belinda's purse and the baby's diaper bag were left out. The camp stove was fully set up, and the milk, cold and unopened, was still sitting there. Even Richard's wallet and Belinda's cigarettes were untouched. The only thing missing? Their swimsuits. After waiting an hour, she called the police. Authorities arrived that night, and right away the scene felt off. One trooper later said the whole place felt spooky. The next morning, Droopy, the family dog, was found alone, scratching at the general store's door, dirty but alive. It only deepened the mystery. A massive search followed. Hundreds of volunteers, police, forest rangers, and even the National Guard scoured the rugged terrain. Helicopters with infrared sensors scanned from above. Over 25 miles were searched, but there was no trace of the family. Robbery was ruled out, so was drowning or a voluntary disappearance. Everything valuable was left behind, and Richard made enough to support them. Something terrible had happened, but no one could figure out what. Then, 7 months later, on April 12, 1975, 2 gold prospectors stumbled upon a shallow cave about 7 miles from the campsite. Inside, behind a barrier of carefully placed rocks, were the remains of Belinda, David, and baby Melissa. Just outside the cave, tied to a nearby tree, was Richard. Dental records confirmed the worst. The autopsies were horrifying. Belinda and David had been shot with a .22 caliber rifle. Melissa had been beaten to death. Richard's cause of death couldn't be determined, but it was clear the family had been murdered. Oddly, a search volunteer swore the cave had been empty during earlier searches, suggesting the killer may have moved the bodies. A witness from Los Angeles recalled seeing a suspicious group, a man, a woman, and another man in a pickup near the Cowdens camp. Investigators believed it could have been Dwayne Lee Little, a convicted murderer recently paroled who was known to be in the area. His girlfriend later confirmed he owned a .22 rifle, and a former cellmate claimed he had confessed. Still, there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. Little is now serving 3 life sentences for another violent attack. But he's never spoken a word about the Cowden case, and to this day, the disappearance and murder of this innocent family remains one of Oregon's darkest, most chilling mysteries. The forest has long buried the truth, and their killer still walks free. It was a chilly spring day in April 2017, and the thunder of Niagara Falls echoed like a warning through the crisp air. The river surged, wild and unforgiving, just as it always had. But on this particular day, it would claim the life of someone who once seemed untouchable by its power, a man who had already beaten the odds and lived to tell the tale. That man was Kirk Jones. Kirk, 53 years old and originally from Michigan, wasn't a stranger to the fury of Niagara Falls. In 2003, he had stunned the world by surviving a plunge over the 167-foot Horseshoe Falls, completely unprotected. No helmet, no barrel, nothing. Just a man, free-falling into one of the most dangerous natural wonders on Earth. Miraculously, he walked away with only minor injuries. Some called it divine intervention, others pure luck. At the time, Kirk had been battling personal issues, and many believed the jump was a desperate cry for help. But against all logic, he survived. For a short while, he was a media sensation, the man who lived. But fame faded fast. Kirk was fined, charged for his stunt, and banned from Canada for life. Still, something in him never let go of that moment. Over the years, he talked about the falls as if they were more than just a place, as if they had become part of who he was. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about returning. He believed there was something left unfinished, something more he had to prove. So he began to plan his comeback. In early 2017, Kirk hatched a bold, if bizarre, plan. This time, he wouldn't just jump. He'd ride over the falls inside a giant inflatable plastic ball, the kind used for zorbing. His logic? If people could roll down hills inside these things and walk away unscathed, why not survive Niagara Falls? It sounded absurd, even reckless. But to Kirk, it was a ticket to a second shot at fame. He hoped the stunt would launch an entertainment career and give him a platform to share his story. Kirk wasn't alone on this final journey either. With him was his pet boa constrictor, Misty. Just like Sonny Boy, the turtle who rode over the falls with George Stathakis in 1930, Misty's presence added a strangely personal element to the already surreal plan. On the day of the stunt, witnesses saw the large ball bobbing in the river, spinning wildly in the rapids as it approached the edge, and then it was gone, swallowed by the mist and roar of the falls. When the ball was later recovered downstream, it was empty. No sign of Kirk, no sign of Misty. For weeks, search and rescue crews scoured the area, holding on to hope that maybe, just maybe, Kirk had survived again. But that hope vanished on June 2nd, 2017, when Kirk's body was found about 12 miles downstream. Misty was never recovered. Kirk Jones, the man who once defied Niagara's deadly grip, had finally been claimed by it. His second attempt wasn't a miracle. It was a tragedy. It left behind questions that still haunt those who followed his story. Why go back? Why tempt fate after already surviving the impossible? Maybe he truly believed lightning could strike twice. Maybe he wanted to reclaim that fleeting moment of invincibility. Or maybe, deep down, he felt a pull, an unshakable connection to the falls that he could never fully explain. Whatever the reason, Kirk's story is a stark reminder. Some forces of nature aren't meant to be challenged. Niagara Falls, in all its beauty and power, demands respect. And for those who don't heed its warning, the price can be ultimate. In May 2013, a tragic event unfolded at South Lakes Wild Animal Park in Dalton-in-Furness, a quiet area in South Cumbria. Sarah Makalea, a 24-year-old keeper originally from Glasgow, lost her life in a horrifying encounter with one of the park's Sumatran tigers. Known for her dedication and experience working with big cats, Sarah had spent more than 2 years at the zoo, which she considered a privilege. However, on this day, a fatal failure in safety protocols turned her passion into tragedy. The tiger, named Padang, was able to escape through a series of unlocked and malfunctioning gates inside the tiger house. These gates were designed to keep the dangerous animals and their keepers separated at all times, featuring lockable, self-closing doors meant to prevent any accidental encounters. But a defective bolt on one of these gates failed to close properly, allowing the tiger to enter the corridor where Sarah was working. The attack was brutal and swift, leaving Sarah with multiple deep puncture wounds to her neck and body that were unsurvivable. Despite being airlifted to a hospital, she was pronounced dead shortly after the incident. The loss sent shockwaves through the community. Her colleagues and family, all of whom struggled to come to terms with the sudden and violent nature of her death. Following the incident, an inquest was held in Kendall, where a jury delivered a narrative verdict. They found that the tiger had gained access to Sarah by entering through 2 open sliding gates within the tiger house before moving through the door that led to the corridor. These lapses in security were not simply human error, but were tied to systemic problems with the zoo's safety systems, particularly the faulty door mechanism that failed to close securely. The zoo, which has since been renamed South Lakes Safari Zoo, admitted to breaching the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. It acknowledged that it had failed to ensure that people who were not staff were kept out of harm's way, and, crucially, that it had not addressed the risks associated with the defective door bolt prior to the attack. The case revealed a troubling picture of inadequate safety measures and poor risk management within the park. Legal proceedings culminated in a significant fine for the zoo, nearly £300,000, with £42,500 of this specifically related to another health and safety breach from July 2014, when a keeper fell from a ladder while preparing to feed the big cats. In addition, the zoo was ordered to cover £150,000 in prosecution costs over the next decade, underscoring the seriousness of its safety failings. David Gill, the zoo's owner, faced individual charges related to the same allegations, but was formally acquitted. Nonetheless, the burden of responsibility remained heavily on the zoo as an institution. Padang, the tiger involved in the fatal attack, was kept alive for some time after the incident, as Sarah's family requested that he not be put down. However, due to his age, the tiger was euthanized a year later, closing a difficult chapter for those involved. The judge overseeing the case made it clear that the tiger's ability to enter Sarah's workspace should never have been possible. He stated that the malfunctioning door mechanism was a substantial contributing factor that directly led to the tragedy. It was a predictable risk that the zoo had failed to mitigate, leading to fatal consequences. The aftermath of the incident saw Sarah's family grappling with immense grief and the painful process of healing. While the guilty plea from the zoo brought some measure of closure, it could not erase the loss or the sense of shock felt by those who loved her. Her family expressed a mixture of relief and vindication, as the case highlighted that the blame did not lie with Sarah, but rather with the zoo's unsafe working conditions. Sarah's brother was particularly vocal in pointing out that the zoo had been punished appropriately for its failures, and that it was fortunate the tragedy had not resulted in more loss of life. The case left the zoo at a crossroads. It needed to either implement serious improvements to safety measures or face the possibility of closure. This tragic story serves as a powerful reminder of the critical importance of rigorous safety standards in places that house dangerous animals. It highlights how even small oversights, like a defective bolt, can lead to devastating consequences. The loss of Sarah Makalea, a dedicated and experienced keeper, underscores the human cost when safety is compromised. Her death remains a somber lesson in the responsibilities wildlife parks carry to protect those who work tirelessly to care for some of the world's most powerful creatures. It was March 23, 2025, on the lush and remote Makalea Falls Trail in Kauai, Hawaii, when 26-year-old Gianna Buzzetta reached the place she'd dreamed about for years. A pastry chef from Oceanside, California, Gianna was hiking with her boyfriend, Connor Quinton, on what was supposed to be a peaceful, unforgettable adventure. That morning, she told Connor he had made her dream come true. Gianna wasn't your average hiker. She was the executive pastry chef at June Jolie, a Michelin-starred restaurant in Carlsbad, where she'd worked for 4 years. Her team described her as humble, fiercely hard-working, and incredibly gifted. She was known for her sharp wit, deep love for animals, and generous spirit, often volunteering at shelters and always putting others first. That day had started quietly. Gianna and Connor stood in a shallow pool at the base of the falls, taking in the calm beauty of the jungle around them. Then, out of nowhere, a loud crack echoed across the cliffs. Connor glanced up, trying to locate the source. Moments later, a boulder broke loose from high above, massive, unstoppable. Before they could react, it struck Gianna directly in the head. She collapsed into the water. Connor rushed to pull her out. She was unconscious but still breathing, bleeding heavily. With no cell signal in the remote area, he made a split-second decision. He ran. For 3 grueling miles, he pushed through rugged terrain, thick brush, and over rocks, desperate to find help. When he finally reached a spot with reception, he called emergency services. Rescue crews moved fast. They reached Gianna, stabilized her, and airlifted her to Wilcox Memorial Hospital before transferring her to Queens Medical Center in Honolulu. Her parents, Katie and Salazetta, immediately flew to Hawaii. They made it just in time to be by her side. Gianna passed away the next day. Her loss was a crushing blow, but her family found comfort knowing that her final hours were spent in a place of pure beauty with the person she loved most. Her mother later shared that Gianna had felt completely happy and at peace before the accident, a moment of true joy. Back in Carlsbad, the news hit hard. At June Jolie, her absence left a hole no one could fill. Restaurant owner John Resnick called the loss paralyzing. Co-workers remembered Gianna as a quiet force of nature, humble, driven, always pushing to improve, always lifting up those around her. Gianna's passion for baking started early. By 12, she was helping her mom with a floral and events business. By 17, she was juggling multiple jobs. After high school, she studied at the Culinary Institute of America in Napa, trained at Michelin-starred restaurants like Spago and Patina, and returned home to build a career filled with creativity and purpose. Alongside her restaurant work, she ran a thriving private cake business known for natural ingredients, vibrant colors, and delicate balance. After her passing, June Jolie hosted a sold-out benefit dinner on April 7th to help her family. A fundraiser organized by family friend Carly W. quickly gained momentum, raising over $40,000 in just a few days toward a $225,000 goal. The support came from across the country. Gianna was remembered as someone who radiated quiet strength, always checking in on friends, always giving more than she took. Her family expressed deep thanks to the first responders and praised Connor's courage for never giving up. Gianna Buzzetta wasn't just a chef. She was a dreamer, a giver, a force of light, and in her final moments, she was exactly where she had always wanted to be, living her dream. It was June 5th, 1990. A warm, sunny day in Niagara Falls, New York. The park buzzed with visitors snapping photos and soaking in the breathtaking view of the thundering waters. But amid the tourists was one man with a very different goal. Jesse Sharp, a 28-year-old experienced kayaker from Tennessee, hadn't come just to admire the falls. He came to conquer them. Jesse wasn't a reckless thrill-seeker. He was a skilled whitewater kayaker known for tackling some of the toughest rapids in North America. He had trained for years and believed he could become the first person to successfully kayak over Niagara Falls. No barrel, no protective gear, just a sleek 12-foot custom fiberglass kayak built for speed and precision. No helmet, no life jacket, just Jesse in the river. To him, this wasn't just a stunt. It was a leap toward fame. Jesse believed that if he pulled it off, it could be his ticket to a career in movies, television, or professional stunt work. He had a vision, a name remembered alongside the great daredevils of history, etched into the legend of Niagara itself. But there was one problem. Going over the falls like this was strictly illegal. Authorities had banned such attempts after a long and tragic history of fatalities. But Jesse wasn't one to be told no. He believed his skills, training, and preparation would make the difference. He spent months getting ready, studying the river, timing the currents, perfecting every maneuver. Then, just before 2 p.m., with the summer sun high overhead, he launched his kayak into the Niagara River. The current was swift, but Jesse stayed in control. His strokes were smooth and sure as he paddled toward the falls. The roar of the water grew deafening. Mist clouded the air as Jesse neared the edge. Onlookers stared in disbelief, unsure if they were witnessing a stunt or a suicide attempt. Just before the drop, Jesse raised his paddle high into the air, his signature gesture, one final display of confidence, and then he vanished. The kayak plunged over the 167-foot Horseshoe Falls, swallowed instantly by the churning white water below. Silence fell across the crowd. All eyes scanned the lower river, waiting, hoping for Jesse to resurface. But he never did. Rescue teams rushed in. Within the hour, they found the kayak, battered and empty, hundreds of yards downstream. But Jesse was gone. His body was never recovered. To this day, his fate remains one of the fall's enduring mysteries. Some say he underestimated the sheer force of the plunge. Others believe he may have been knocked unconscious or trapped beneath the powerful undercurrents. We'll likely never know. What's certain is that the river, with all its beauty and might, refused to be conquered that day. Jesse's story splits opinion. To some, he was chasing greatness, pushing the boundaries of what's possible. To others, he was a victim of reckless ambition, blinded by dreams of fame. Whatever the perspective, his final journey serves as a sobering reminder. Niagara Falls is not a stage. It's a force of nature, unpredictable, untamed, and unforgiving. Jesse Sharp set out to make history. In a way, he did, but not in the way he imagined. Instead of launching a career, his name now lives on as one of the many souls lost to the falls, a cautionary tale of courage, ambition, and the steep price of daring dreams. In the summer of 2017, Carol Sue Kirkin from Rochester Hills, Michigan, set out on what was meant to be a memorable family vacation to Tanzania. The plan was a classic African safari, a chance to explore the wild landscapes and experience nature's majesty up close. For Carol, 75 years old, this trip was more than just a holiday. It was an adventure, a celebration of life, and time spent with loved ones in a faraway land. Carol was no ordinary traveler. She was a woman known in her community for her kindness, strength, and dedication to helping others. As a founding member of the Rochester Area Women's Fund, she had spent years supporting initiatives aimed at empowering women. She also volunteered frequently at the North Oakland YMCA, where she worked to support military families. Her spirit was generous, and her impact deeply felt by those who knew her. This trip was, in many ways, a reflection of her adventurous soul, someone who embraced life fully and sought to create meaningful experiences wherever she went. The family's safari took place in the stunning landscapes of Tanzania, where wildlife roams free and the natural world reveals itself in spectacular ways. But what began as an exciting expedition quickly turned tragic. On August 5th, during a moment near the waterside, Carol was attacked by a hippopotamus, one of the continent's most powerful and unpredictable animals. The encounter was sudden and devastating, and despite the presence and efforts of her son, who was with her at the time, Carol succumbed to her injuries. She passed away in his arms, a heartbreaking end to a journey meant to celebrate life. News of Carol's death spread quickly through her hometown and beyond, leaving friends, family, and community members in shock. Those who knew her described her as a force of nature, someone who quietly inspired others through her actions rather than words. Her loss was felt deeply, a stark reminder of how fragile life can be, especially when faced with the raw unpredictability of the wild. In the aftermath, social media became a place where loved ones shared memories and offered condolences. Tributes poured in, speaking of Carol's warmth, her willingness to support others, and the way she took those around her under her wing. Many noted that she had a unique way of encouraging people to find their own path. She didn't dictate what to see or think, but helped others learn to look at the world through their own eyes. The tragedy also sparked conversations about the inherent risks involved in wildlife safaris. While safaris offer unforgettable encounters with nature, they also come with dangers that can't be ignored. Hippos, despite their seemingly slow and docile appearance, are among Africa's most aggressive animals, responsible for more human fatalities than many other species. Carol's death underscored the importance of vigilance and respect for wildlife behavior, reminding travelers that even the most seasoned adventurers are vulnerable in the wild. Her passing was not just a loss to her family, but also to the community she served so passionately. Carol left behind her husband, Bill, their 3 children, and 5 grandchildren. The legacy she built through her volunteer work and her genuine care for others remains alive, continuing to inspire those who carry her memory forward. Carol Sue Kirkin's story is a poignant mix of adventure and tragedy. It's a tale that highlights the beauty and unpredictability of the natural world, and the importance of approaching it with both wonder and caution. It also tells of a life well lived, a woman who embraced every moment with generosity and courage, leaving behind a legacy that reaches far beyond the boundaries of her own life. Her journey to Africa was meant to be a celebration, a time of connection with family and nature, but it also became a solemn reminder of how quickly things can change when the wild asserts its power. It was November 22, 2020, high in the Pyrenees Mountains along the French-Spanish border, when 37-year-old British hiker Esther Dingley set out on what would be her final trek. An experienced solo adventurer, Esther had spent years traveling Europe in a camper van with her longtime partner Dan Colgate, documenting their life together on a travel blog. This time, she was hiking alone. That afternoon, she summited Pic de Sauvegarde, a 737-meter peak, and sent Dan a selfie via WhatsApp around 4 p.m. They shared a brief 90-second video call, the last time anyone would hear from her. Esther planned to spend the night at Refuge de Venasque, a small unmanned mountain shelter nearby. Her route, crossing briefly into France before looping back into Spain, was well within her capabilities. Her last message read, "Might dip into France, hoping Refuge Venasque has a winter room. Keep you posted when can. Love you X." She never sent another message. 3 days later, on November 25th, Dan reported her missing. He had been house-sitting just 100 miles away. Authorities from both France and Spain launched a joint search effort across nearly 700 square miles. Drones, helicopters, and alpine rescue teams combed the rugged terrain, but found no sign of Esther. As December brought worsening snowstorms, the official search was suspended until spring. Dan stayed behind, continuing to search whenever weather allowed. He had mapped her planned route in a detailed 23-page document, a route she had personally confirmed before setting out. Still, there were no answers. By February 2021, Dan voiced growing concerns that Esther may have encountered someone, possibly hunters, but authorities continued to treat the case as a tragic accident. When spring arrived and the snow began to melt, the search resumed. On July 23, 2021, a group of mountain runners made a grim discovery near Port de la Glaire, not far from Esther's intended path, a fragment of a human skull. DNA confirmed it was hers. Then, on August 9th, Dan made the heartbreaking discovery himself. After narrowing his search, he found Esther's body about 400 meters below the summit of Pic de la Glaire. Her backpack, hiking shoes, and phone were nearby, partially concealed by snow and months of exposure. Her yellow tent was never found. Esther's hiking shoes showed signs of heavy wear. Although she had packed Kula microspikes, traction gear for icy terrain, she hadn't been wearing them. An autopsy later confirmed that she likely died instantly after falling roughly 100 feet from a rocky ridge. The injuries pointed to a high-impact fall, possibly caused by slipping on ice made worse by worn soles. Her phone held no further clues beyond that final video call. The spot where she fell was remote and difficult to reach, contributing to the months-long delay in locating her. There were no signs of foul play. Investigators concluded that Esther was following her planned route when she slipped. Despite her experience and careful preparation, the terrain had proven treacherous and unforgiving. In a joint statement, Dan and Esther's mother thanked the search teams and everyone who had supported them during the long months of uncertainty. They shared their sorrow, now knowing for certain that Esther would not be coming home. Esther Dingley had prepared for this journey with thought and care. But in the mountains, even the most seasoned hikers can face dangers beyond their control. Her final adventure was one she embraced fully, but nature, as always, had the final word. It was a hot summer afternoon on August 5th, 1951. when William Red Hill Jr. stood at the edge of the Niagara River. The air buzzed with anticipation as crowds gathered, eager to watch yet another daring feat at the falls. But what they didn't know was that this wouldn't be just another stunt. It would be the final chapter in a man's desperate bid for recognition and the moment that changed Niagara's daredevil culture forever. Red Hill Jr. came from a legacy of river legends. His father, William Red Hill Sr., was a celebrated hero in Niagara, famous for rescuing stranded tourists and warning thrill-seekers about the river's deadly power. Red Jr. had grown up in those shadows, chasing the reputation of a man whose bravery had earned him reverence. He tried to follow the same path, working as a riverman, diving into the currents for rescue missions, and even dabbling in a few stunts of his own. But nothing seemed to earn him the fame he so badly wanted. By the early 1950s, his life was unraveling. Financial struggles mounted, and his once strong family name had begun to fade into memory. In his mind, only one thing could restore it: a daring stunt that would grab headlines and immortalize him like his father before him. So Red devised a plan, but not a good one. He decided to go over Niagara Falls in a homemade contraption he simply called the Thing. And it was, in every sense, a thing. Slapped together from oversized inner tubes, fishing nets, canvas straps, and sandbags, it looked more like a pile of garbage than a protective vessel. Unlike the carefully engineered barrels others had used, Red's Thing lacked any real structure or safety. It was flimsy, unpredictable, and wildly unsafe. People tried to talk him out of it. Friends, family, experts, everyone warned him this was suicide. But Red wouldn't hear it. This was his moment, and no amount of reasoning could pull him back. With crowds lining the riverbanks and reporters ready, Red climbed into the jumbled mess of materials and set off down the river. For a while, the contraption bobbed and twisted toward the edge, wobbling like it might fall apart before even reaching the drop. As it neared the brink, spectators held their breath. Then it went over, disappearing into the mist and thunder below. Seconds later, the river spit out its answer. Pieces of canvas, shredded tubes, and tangled netting began washing downstream. The Thing had been torn apart by the falls with terrifying ease. Red was gone. His body was recovered the next day near the Maid of the Mist landing, broken and unrecognizable. The very stunt that was meant to save his legacy had destroyed him instead. Red Hill Jr.'s death sent a shockwave through the Niagara community. What had once been celebrated as brave, even romantic, suddenly looked reckless and tragic. In the aftermath, authorities cracked down. Permits for stunts became harder to get. Safety regulations were tightened. Penalties grew steeper. The age of freewheeling daredevilry at Niagara Falls began to fade. Red's story is one of ambition turned desperation, of legacy turned loss. He didn't get the fame he hoped for, but in a strange way, he left a mark. His tragic fall forced the world to look at Niagara Falls differently, not just as a place of spectacle, but as a force of nature demanding respect. And because of that, Red Hill Jr., even in death, helped make the falls a little safer for those who followed. In June 2015, Catherine Chappell, a 29-year-old visual effects editor from New York, arrived in South Africa with a mission. She wasn't there as a typical tourist. Her goal was bigger, more purposeful: to spend 2 weeks volunteering at a wildlife sanctuary that focused on protecting endangered species like rhinos and elephants. With a camera in hand and a heart full of passion for animals and nature, she dreamed of eventually creating a documentary that would expose the horrors of animal poaching. For her, this trip was more than an escape. It was the beginning of something meaningful. Catherine had always lived with a deep sense of adventure. Her work in film had taken her across continents, from Europe to Japan, and more recently to Canada, where she had worked on major productions, including HBO's Game of Thrones. But as impressive as her professional journey was, it was her curiosity about the natural world and her drive to protect it that defined her most. On that fateful day, Catherine decided to take a break from her volunteering duties to experience one of South Africa's popular wildlife attractions, the Lion Park. just outside Johannesburg. The park offers visitors the rare opportunity to see lions up close from the safety of their vehicles. It's the kind of thrill that leaves a lasting impression, but with such proximity comes strict rules. Chief among them, never open your windows. Catherine joined a guided drive through the reserve, likely excited at the chance to get some clear photographs of the majestic animals she admired so much. The lions wandered freely within the park, used to the presence of humans and vehicles, but still very much wild at heart. At some point during the drive, her window was rolled down, just enough to allow her camera to capture the moment. What happened next was sudden and devastating. A lioness approached the vehicle. In a split second, the calm of the scene was shattered. The animal lunged through the open window and attacked. The driver, reportedly a local tour operator, tried to intervene and was seriously injured in the process. Despite the efforts, Catherine was fatally wounded. The attack shocked the world and made headlines across international media. It was a tragic end to a journey that had been filled with hope, compassion, and purpose. Officials at the Lion Park confirmed the attack and reiterated the importance of keeping vehicle windows closed at all times. Sadly, it was not the first such incident the park had seen. Earlier that year, an Australian tourist had been bitten by a lion under similar circumstances. A teenager had also been attacked by a cheetah after entering the park on a bicycle. Yet another reminder of how unpredictable and powerful wild animals can be. Following Catherine's death, the lioness involved in the incident was not euthanized, but was removed from public areas. The park reinforced its safety rules, emphasizing once again the line that separates humans from the wild, and how crucial it is not to cross it even with good intentions. Catherine's story became more than just a tragic headline. It served as a lesson on the thin line between admiration and intrusion when it comes to wildlife. She had come to South Africa to protect animals, to tell their story, and to help preserve their future. Ironically and tragically, her passion for that world brought her too close to it. Her family, friends, and those who followed her work remember her not only as a talented visual artist, but as someone who wanted to make a difference. Her journey, though heartbreakingly short, continues to inspire conversations about conservation, responsible tourism, and the wild beauty that, for all its wonder, still demands caution and respect. Catherine's legacy lives on as a reminder. When we enter the natural world, we are visitors, guests in a space that doesn't belong to us, and even the most noble intentions must be paired with awareness, humility, and care.